I love James Bond. This franchise has had a huge impact on me during the course of my life. It goes without saying that Sean Connery is fantastic. He's definitely the most iconic actor to have played the role, and I also enjoy some of the portrayals of the other actors who have played Bond respectively. But Daniel Craig has by far and away always been my favorite. He is the Bond that I grew up with, so I might be a little bit biased, but I just love his version of the character, and I think that his run overall has been the most exciting, though not perfect. To give you a brief overview, here are my thoughts on the films of Craig's era. Casino Royale to this day is not just my favorite film in the franchise, but it's one of my favorite action films of all time. It's intense, the action scenes are filmed spectacularly, it's got a great villain, and Daniel Craig is an absolute badass. Quantum of Solace is a disappointing follow-up. It feels extremely rushed, which makes sense due to the writer's strike at the time, but the story is lacking, to say the least. Everything feels underdeveloped. On top of that, the action is poorly handled. They clearly took inspiration from the shaky cam style popularized by the Bourne franchise. It's really distracting and difficult to make out what's even happening, and in comparison to the smoother camera movements of the rest of Craig's films, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Skyfall, on the other hand, is great. I have very fond memories of seeing this film in theaters when it first came out. It's one of my favorite movie-going experiences, because my mom snuck me and a friend at the time to see it, because we were only 10 years old at the time, and ever since I've been a major Bond fan. Nostalgia aside, this movie is beautifully shot, it's exciting, Javier Bardem is a twisted and darkly funny antagonist, everything about the movie just clicks. This was followed by Spectre, directed by Sam Mendes, who also directed Skyfall, but unfortunately it doesn't hold a candle to that film. I don't think Spectre is terrible, it's okay, it just doesn't have the same level of excitement as Craig's better films. The action and plot don't feel like they carry much weight, despite the film's constant insistence that it does. I think the film just misses some of the edge of Craig's other films. This brings me neatly along to No Time to Die. It's been quite a while since Spectre came out. At some point it looked like Daniel Craig was going to quit the role. There were already talks of other actors potentially being cast, but in the end he agreed to come back for one more. And I was so happy to hear this because I think ending his run on Spectre would have been a bit underwhelming. So needless to say, I was very excited to see this film. Like I said, Craig is my favorite Bond, but I also try to keep my expectations at a minimal because there was a lot of negative sounding press around this film, coupled with the fact that the last film wasn't great. But I'm happy to report that No Time to Die is really good. This film surprised the hell out of me. One of the first films I reviewed on this channel was Beasts of No Nation, which is good, go check it out, but Cary Fukunaga, the director of that film, is the guy who directed this, and he has done a fantastic job. The action is so well handled. Both the camera movements and the stunt team, as well as Craig himself, have given back Bond the edge that I think was missing in Spectre. It feels like they pushed that PG-13 rating similarly to the way they did in Casino Royale. It's brutal, the punches are pulsating, they actually carry weight. There's a long take action scene up a staircase which was so cool. Now, Daniel Craig. This is by far his most demanding Bond performance as an actor. An aspect I was not expecting is the emotional side of this film. This movie has heart to a degree that no Bond film has ever attempted. Craig's Bond is a self-contained story that doesn't tie to any other Bond films. In Casino Royale, we see him first achieve his 00 status, starting out as the agent we know him as previously, and through these films we get to see him change and mature as a character. I suppose some people may not like that because they expect Bond films to follow a familiar formula, and if that's you, you probably won't enjoy the film as much. They take some really bold risks, two in particular. Now, I won't get into spoilers, but I will say that on paper, these are decisions that could easily be butchered. But thankfully, I think that they were really well handled, and that's credited to the writing, but also Craig's fantastic performance. The supporting cast, both old and new, do a great job. Ana de Armas is a standout. She's in it for just one scene, but she's really entertaining. And Seydoux, which comes as quite a surprise because she was Bond's love interest in the last film, and in that I really didn't care for her character. There honestly wasn't much chemistry between her and Craig Inspector, but here, her character is much more well realized. She's given some backstory which is integrated quite heavily into the plot, which is a creative decision I really liked. I actually cared about her and the relationship she has with Bond, and it plays quite a big part in the emotional side of the film, which I think worked perfectly. Another aspect I'd like to briefly touch on is the humor. A trend that's been happening over the last couple of years, particularly in big blockbuster films such as ones produced by Marvel, has been to insert jokes in the middle of what could be a potentially tense or emotional scene. In turn, these jokes take away from these scenes, which is really, really frustrating. I mention this because the timing of the humor in No Time to Die I think was really well done, because this film does have jokes that I found genuinely funny, but none of them are used to undermine or take away from a tense moment, which is to the film's credit, and I hope more big budget films follow its footsteps in that regard. However, this film isn't perfect. I'd say my biggest criticism as a whole has to do with Rami Malek's character, who plays the main villain. I found him to be quite underwritten. His entire motivation becomes very vague and therefore unclear, particularly in the third act. His scheme is similar to that of past Bond villains, but it's his reasoning that I found to be lacking. Though I must say I did enjoy Rami Malek's performance overall. In the opening scene I found him to be very intimidating. He has these mannerisms throughout which gave the character a creepy vibe whenever he was on screen. So yeah, it's not Malek's performance but more the writing of his character that I took issue with. But that aside, No Time to Die is a fantastic send-off to Craig's Bond era. I think for the most part they knocked it out of the park. I'd highly recommend it if you're a fan of these films or just action in general, which is why I'm going to give No Time to Die an 8 out of 10. I'm gonna seriously miss Craig in this role. He had an amazing run, and I just hope whoever they cast next does a good job. So yeah, anyway, that's all for today. If you like this video, leave it a thumbs up and consider subscribing, and thanks for watching.